For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Public Protector Thuli Madonsela joins me to reflect on her term in office. You have now, for 7 years, worked as a public protector. When you reflect on your time in office, what do you think are the most important functions of this office in South Africa's constitutional democracy?
The public protector is an important constitutional body whose key responsibility is to protect the public from improper use of power and resources in government. Essentially, the public protector helps the people to highlight and to push back against wrongdoing in government.
And many people believe that during your time in office, you have helped to strengthen this office as a public protector. Do you believe that you have helped to better define this position?
Certainly, I have, together with the team, helped to crystallize the powers of the public protector. The office has always done well in the last 21 years in terms of fulfilling its mandate. However, due to the history of the office, in that it started with only two powers, the power to investigate and the power to report, it got stuck in those two powers, the power to investigate and to report, and didn't fully appreciate its third power, which is the power to take appropriate remedial action. That doesn't mean it didn't take appropriate remedial action. This institution, particularly under Advocate Moshwana, was taking appropriate remedial action, and Donny Dam is an example. He was the first to take concrete measures to restore the complainants as close as possible to where they would have been if they hadn't been wrongdoing by government. The only difference is that the way the reports were written, they were written as recommendations, and the way the discourse between the public protector and government was executed, it was always the understanding that we make recommendations, which was incorrect based on the Constitution.
And how many cases has the Public Protector's Office handled while you were in this position? And can you just give us an idea of the types of cases you are working with?
During my term, we must have handled over 60,000 cases. The bulk of those cases, probably 95%, are what we refer to as Dhlamini cases. Those are cases that involve administrative injustice suffered by each person. That would be somebody who was dismissed from work wrongfully, somebody who was denied a pension or workers' compensation money, or a SASSA grant wrongfully, or was underpaid in that regard, or somebody whose municipal services were switched off unlawfully, Home Affairs denied you a passport, an ID, a birth certificate, a death certificate, or things like that. That's the majority of cases that we have handled, RDP houses, etc. The 5% is about abuse of power and abuse of state resources. That would involve somebody maybe taking money from government and using it for their own personal benefit against the law, or improper award of tenders, jobs, and RTP housing to people that are close to you, whether they're family, political connections, and things like that, or somebody who have paid your money, which we regard as corruption.
Did your investigation of the Nkandla matter put you under more pressure than any of the other cases that you have investigated?
Absolutely. Nkandla did put me under a lot of pressure, unexpected pressure. You will recall that it started with the security cluster saying I shouldn't investigate because they were internal investigations, and then later saying that I couldn't make findings regarding security matters because I'm not a security expert, knowing of course that it's judges make decisions about hospital malpractice, and they don't have to be doctors. They make decisions about what is done by rocket scientists all over the world. They don't have to be rocket scientists, but So there was that, a bit of pushback, a lot of misunderstanding about the nature of supervisory powers, because there was a question of the minister has executive powers to decide what to do and to do that, but I have supervisory powers, which is to check whether he operated within the powers that he's given and did not then exceed those powers. And that was a bit of a confusion. And yes, there was a lot of pressure, but then we thought everything was corrected, because eventually we came together with the ministers, we defined what was security in terms of the final report and what was not security, to make sure that we don't compromise the security of the president or any other person. But once we released the report, the final report, all hell broke loose. There was so much mudslinging. Eventually, there were 3 documents that were released, calling me a spy, but each one of them having a different story about how did I become a spy and who do I report to. And yes, it did take an unexpected turn.
And is your office sufficiently resourced now?
No, the office is not sufficiently resourced, not by a long shot. It's a structural defect. The office was created in 1979 as a substructure of the Department of Justice. When it was renamed, the structural composition remained the same. And over the years, then, Parliament has given it an increase like 10%, 20%, etc. But a percentage increase is useless when you have a structural defect. You need to reconceive the office as a ministry. Only last year did we elevate our CEO to the level of a DG, although the Public Protector has been an executive authority since the appointment of Advocate Baqo. And our units are understaffed. If you look at our IT, there is a director there, and then the next level of authority are level 7s, that is entry level, more like a messenger level. And it's dysfunctional. It's worse with investigations. You've just heard that SARS spent 23 million on one investigation into the rogue unit. We're doing that investigation ourselves, but we were not given 23 million. And in fact, we don't have 23 million per year to do all investigations. If we're looking at the amount of money that is allocated to investigations.
The DA recently asked you to probe President Jacob Zuma on the violation of the Executive Members Ethics Act. How is the progress on that?
The progress is slow on the investigation, although by law we're required to complete that investigation in 30 days, because that's the statutory limitation in terms of the Executive Members Ethics Act. But due to inadequacy of resources, as I indicated earlier, we are trotting towards the end.
You've also investigated a lot of issues that were politically related. Didn't you at times felt that the political parties were using you to settle their scores?
I've always understood that political parties would use the courts, would use Parliament, would use this office to settle their scores. People who report thieves to the police are often settling a score. People who report murderers to the courts are often settling scores. What we have made sure of is that we don't concern ourselves with the politics. We just concern ourselves with the substance of what is being reported. Does it look like there's a case to be answered? And if there's a case to be answered, which we establish after a preliminary investigation, we then follow through. All we do is to look for the facts, or we look for evidence and facts, and we seek to find the truth the best we know how, and to tell it the way we know how. And our conversation is the same, whether the matter was reported by a politician or by an ordinary person, or initiated by ourselves, because we have the power to initiate an investigation. The questions are the same. What happened? what should have happened if the law and the rules had been followed? Is there discrepancy between what was done and what should have been done? If there's a discrepancy, is it material enough for us to call the conduct improper conduct? And if it's improper conduct, was anybody prejudiced or suffered an injustice because of what was done wrongly? And if there was any prejudice, either to the taxpayers as a whole or to one individual, how do we bring them as close as possible to the situation they should have been if proper conduct had been followed?
You are stepping down in October. What word would you give to a person who would be coming into your position?
I would say be yourself, no matter what. Follow your own conscience, your own values. Never make a decision that is not in resonance with your own values, because ultimately there's a constitution, there's the law, and if you know what is right based on the constitution and the law, follow that, because if you don't follow that, you will be at odds with your own soul and you'll be sad. Work with your team. They are smart, talented men and women that work here. They are committed to the cause. They know also what they're doing, but ultimately make the decisions that you're happy to live with.
What qualities do you think that person should have?
I would say they should ideally be a lawyer, a professional, non-politician, and somebody. The most important quality for me is it should be somebody who has always been a crusader for human rights, a crusader for a fair society. To take somebody who's never been concerned, who's never done a single thing in their lives except for pay, and then put them in this position would be a disaster. Because most of the people who work here see it as a calling. It's not about the money you earn. It's really about making a difference. Whether you're making a difference in clawing back money that was taken away through corruption, or you are restoring Dhlamini's dignity or life, it is a calling.
What are your future plans?
A long leave, 15 months. During that leave, I will be studying and writing 2 books, one a personal story and the other on administrative law. After that, which will be 2018, I'm going to work as a lawyer, a law teacher, and a human rights activist, focusing primarily on issues of the rule of law, constitutionalism, and social justice. And I will be doing a lot of work with young people, because they are the ones at the moment who seem to understand what do we need to do to get back on track to deliver the South Africa we want, where everyone's potential is freed and life improved.
That was Public Protector Thuli Madonsela reflecting on her term in office.